November 21, 1942, 7:15 a.m. A sprawling airfield in Wichita, Kansas, shrouded in frost and anticipation. Above, at a mere 20 feet off the ground, the first prototype of what would become the B-29 superfortress shivered on its landing gear, engines humming with barely restrained power. The world above was about to witness a machine that Britain had once declared impossible. The B-29 bomber was not merely an airplane. It was a dream stitched together from metal, ambition, and thousands of hours of labor, overcoming skeptics, technical nightmares, and the relentless pressures of wartime urgency. In 1940, a message arrived from Britain, carried not by diplomats but by the weary voices of engineers who had stared at blueprints and said what many believed to be true. To fly such a bomber, with pressurized cabins, advanced remote, controlled gun turrets, and a range capable of reaching Tokyo from bases in China, this is impossible. To the British, the very idea seemed a flight of fantasy. The technology required did not exist, and the world was at war. Yet across the Atlantic, the United States Army Air Forces heard a different challenge, not a declaration of failure, but a call to surpass what had never been done before. The notion of impossibility became a spark. Ambitious engineers, technicians, and pilots understood that to innovate was to risk, and the B-29 would become their daring answer. The vision for the B-29 was nothing short of extraordinary. It demanded engines capable of producing 200 horsepower each, an unprecedented figure for a bomber of such size. These engines, the Wright R-3350 duplex Cyclone, were marvels of engineering on paper, but temperamental and unpredictable in practice. Early tests revealed a frightening tendency to overheat and even catch fire during extended flights. Every subsystem of the aircraft was experimental. Hydraulics that controlled remote turrets, new pressurization technology for high-altitude cruise, and a massive airframe that pushed the limits of materials science. Engineers were navigating a labyrinth of unknowns, their work a delicate balance between genius and disaster. Even the idea of a pressurized cabin, a sealed environment to allow crew members to operate safely at altitudes above 30,000 feet, was a gamble. It was a technology so new that no large aircraft in the world had flown successfully with such a system, and yet, it was a necessity for long-range missions over the Pacific. The human stories behind the B-29 project bring its enormity into focus. At Boeing's Wichita plant, thousands of workers poured into the hangars before dawn, their hands coated in oil and soot, their eyes sharp with concentration. Mechanics recalled lying beneath engines, improvising solutions to prevent fires, often using nothing more than ingenuity, duct tape, and sheer determination. One young engineer remembered holding a propeller in his hands and thinking, "If this breaks, we all fall with it, but we will not let it break." There was fear, certainly, but it was mingled with exhilaration, the kind that comes when ordinary people confront an extraordinary challenge and refuse to yield. Engineers and designers communicated by scribbled notes, hurried diagrams, and constant experimentation, often working around the clock to meet deadlines that seemed impossibly tight. Every day brought new setbacks, from engine failures to structural issues, yet every day also brought breakthroughs that inched the impossible closer to reality. The B-29's conception was not merely about machines or metal. It was about the audacity of vision. It symbolized the belief that boundaries existed only to be tested. The United States had chosen to confront a problem deemed unsolvable, and in doing so, it embraced a mindset of relentless curiosity and courage. The aircraft's design demanded not only technical skill, but unwavering confidence in human ingenuity. To fly a bomber capable of reaching across continents, surviving the harshest altitudes, and carrying enormous payloads into enemy territory required a team willing to question every assumption, to invent where no blueprint existed, and to trust that together, they could accomplish what others had declared impossible. At Boeing's sprawling Wichita plant, the B-29 project became a theater of relentless activity, where the roar of engines and the clatter of metal echoed through the hangars day and night. The year was 1942, and the United States was deeply entrenched in a global conflict that demanded results yesterday. Time was the enemy, yet the clock pressed forward without mercy, and every delay could cost lives on distant battlefields. Engineers, designers, and mechanics worked in shifts that blurred the line between day and night, their hands perpetually stained with oil and sweat, their minds racing with calculations that could decide the fate of a single flight, or of an entire campaign. Entire departments were reorganized almost overnight to prioritize speed, innovation, and efficiency. Teams that had once operated in silos now collaborated at breakneck pace, sharing discoveries and mistakes alike, knowing that every insight could prevent disaster or make history. One of the most formidable challenges they faced was the B-29's enormous wingspan. At 141 feet from tip to tip, the wings had to carry a fuselage heavier than almost any previous bomber while remaining maneuverable and structurally sound. Engineers experimented with a dizzying array of designs, running stress tests, calculating lift, and adjusting angles to ensure that the aircraft could not only take off fully loaded, but also survive long-range missions over hostile territory. They had no margin for error. A single miscalculation could cause catastrophic failure. Meanwhile, the Wright R-3350 engines, each producing 200 horsepower, were temperamental giants that frequently overheated or even burst into flames during long flights. The engineers faced a daunting paradox. They needed power greater than ever achieved before, yet the technology to sustain that power was fragile and untested. Every solution required creativity, precision, and, most importantly, courage to try ideas that had never been attempted. The human effort behind the B-29 was as dramatic as the engineering itself. Technicians often lay beneath massive engines for hours, shimming components, rerouting coolant lines, and improvising fixes on the fly, while superiors paced nervously above, checking flight schedules and production targets. One mechanic later remembered that, in those moments, it felt as if the entire future rested in his hands. "Every day we touched that plane," he said, "it felt like we were holding the future in our hands, fragile but unstoppable." That fragile yet unstoppable quality defined the B-29 project. Ordinary people performed extraordinary feats, inventing solutions under impossible pressure, trusting in both their skill and the vision of their colleagues. It was a human machine as much as a mechanical one, each individual's contribution a vital component of the aircraft's eventual success. The B-29 also demanded a culture of experimentation and fearless problem-solving. When engines erupted in flames during early test flights, teams didn't retreat. They dissected, redesigned, and innovated. Engineers developed new cooling systems, modified exhaust arrangements, and tested different alloys to withstand heat, often under conditions that would have made a lesser team abandon the project. In one instance, a team discovered that a slight adjustment in the cowling around the engine reduced overheating dramatically. It was a small change, almost invisible to the naked eye, yet it transformed the plane from a potential disaster into a reliable weapon. Every challenge, no matter how technical or terrifying, became an opportunity to prove that ingenuity could bend the impossible to human will. Amid the chaos and technical hurdles, a sense of purpose infused every task. Workers and engineers understood that they were not merely assembling an aircraft. They were constructing a tool that could change the course of a global conflict. Each rivet hammered into place, each engine part secured, was a contribution to a larger vision, a statement of confidence that human skill and determination could outpace fear and doubt. The B-29 project was a crucible, testing not only metallurgy, aerodynamics, and mechanics, but also the resilience, creativity, and spirit of the people who refused to let time, technology, or skepticism dictate failure. Against the relentless pressure of the clock, they engineered not just an aircraft, but a triumph of human perseverance and imagination that would soar far beyond Wichita, carrying the dreams and hopes of a nation on its wings. In September 1942, the first B-29 prototype lifted from the tarmac in Wichita, Kansas, and the world paused in astonishment. For the first time, engineers and pilots saw a machine that could climb higher than any other bomber, fly farther without refueling, and carry payloads that would have seemed unimaginable just a few years earlier. Yet the initial flights were far from smooth. The B-29 was a marvel in theory, but in practice, it was a temperamental giant. Engines overheated and occasionally burst into flames mid-flight, hydraulic systems faltered under pressure, and structural components revealed weaknesses under the strain of altitude and weight. The challenges were immense, and the line between success and catastrophe was razor thin. Every flight became a high-stakes experiment, testing not only the aircraft, but the courage and ingenuity of the people who operated it. The early trials of the B-29 are filled with stories of sheer audacity and human resourcefulness. Crews found themselves in situations that would have unnerved the bravest aviators. Engine fires were frighteningly common, and pilots had to make split-second decisions to save both the plane and their lives. On one notorious test flight, a B-29's engine erupted in flames over the Kansas plains. The flight engineer later recounted the moment with vivid intensity. "I prayed to every deity I knew, then fixed it with duct tape and a wrench. Somehow she flew again." It was a small act in the grand scope of engineering, but it captured the spirit of the entire project: resilience, improvisation, and a refusal to accept failure. Mechanics and technicians often worked alongside the flight crews, diagnosing problems on the runway and making last-minute repairs that were equal parts science and instinct. The plane itself seemed almost alive, demanding respect, attention, and an unwavering commitment to its potential. Each test flight revealed new lessons. Hydraulic failures led to revisions in the control systems, and overheating engines forced teams to develop sophisticated cooling solutions. Engineers dissected every failure, sometimes tearing apart entire engines or sections of the fuselage, analyzing components down to the smallest bolt. There was a remarkable sense of urgency. Time was precious, and every mistake cost valuable resources and delayed the deployment of a weapon that could alter the war. Yet even in the midst of frustration and danger, there was exhilaration. Pilots described the first successful long-range flights with awe, as if they were discovering the future of aviation. The B-29 did not just defy expectations, it demanded that human skill rise to match its ambition. By 1944, after thousands of hours of rigorous testing, revisions, and painstaking labor, the B-29 had transformed from a fragile prototype into a reliable instrument of war. Its pressurized cabins allowed crews to operate safely at altitudes above 30,000 feet, reducing vulnerability to enemy fighters. Its remote-controlled turrets gave gunners unprecedented accuracy while keeping them protected, and its massive payload capacity enabled long-range missions that had once seemed impossible. The B-29 became the backbone of America's strategic bombing campaign in the Pacific, a testament not only to the ingenuity of its designers, but also to the courage and persistence of the men and women who refused to accept limits. Every flight, every repair, every sleepless night contributed to a machine that symbolized human determination writ large across the sky. What makes the story of the B-29 truly remarkable is that it was not just a triumph of metal and mechanics, but a triumph of the human spirit. The aircraft demanded excellence, perseverance, and creativity in equal measure. Each engineer, mechanic, and pilot who worked on the project carried a piece of that triumph with them, understanding that they were doing more than building a bomber. They were building a symbol of possibility. The trials they faced, from fiery engines to mechanical mysteries, only reinforced the lesson that with courage, collaboration, and unwavering determination, the impossible could be achieved. In the story of the B-29, the line between ambition and reality was erased, leaving behind a legacy of innovation, resilience, and the audacious belief that no challenge was too great to overcome. The triumph of the B-29 was never measured simply by the tons of ordnance it carried or the thousands of miles it flew across the Pacific. Its true achievement lay in the leap it represented in human imagination and technical skill. For the first time, engineers had produced an aircraft that combined extreme range, massive payload capacity, high-altitude performance, and complex systems like pressurized cabins and remote-controlled gun turrets. These innovations did more than win battles. They reshaped the future of aviation. The lessons learned in the frantic workshops and wind tunnels of Wichita, Seattle, and Marietta did not vanish once the war ended. Pressurization technology allowed commercial airliners to soar comfortably above storms and turbulence, turning transcontinental and transoceanic flight from a dangerous adventure into a daily possibility for millions. The multiple engine systems perfected for the B-29 laid the groundwork for modern redundancy and reliability standards, making air travel safer than anyone in the 1940s could have imagined. The remote-controlled gunnery systems, so advanced that skeptics had called them impossible, became the foundation for later automation and avionics, influencing everything from passenger safety systems to military drones decades later. Yet even more remarkable than the technological legacy was the human one. The men and women who built, maintained, and flew the B-29 were ordinary people faced with extraordinary challenges. Thousands of technicians labored beneath engines that could erupt into flame at any moment, adjusting coolant lines, balancing massive propellers, and patching parts with the same meticulous care and courage that surgeons bring to the operating table. Engineers faced theoretical and practical problems that had no precedent. They invented solutions on the fly, rewrote manuals, and reimagined entire components in real time. Pilots and flight crews risked life and limb testing prototypes, executing emergency landings, and flying missions that stretched both aircraft and human endurance to their limits. In every one of these moments, the impossible became achievable because of creativity, collaboration, and sheer perseverance. It was a lesson not just in engineering, but in human potential, that when individuals unite behind a shared purpose, they can transform the boundaries of what seems feasible. The B-29's influence extended beyond aviation and technology into culture, morale, and national identity. During World War II, it became a symbol of American ingenuity and industrial might, a tangible proof that rapid mobilization, rigorous planning, and bold experimentation could achieve results that once seemed fantastical. Families working in factories, engineers staying nights to solve impossible problems, pilots and crews taking to the skies. They all carried a piece of that symbolic weight. The B-29 embodied the idea that progress was forged not only in laboratories or hangars, but in the hearts and minds of those willing to tackle unprecedented challenges. Decades later, the very principles that guided its creation, meticulous design, adaptability, and teamwork, continue to inspire engineers, pilots, and innovators around the world. It stands as a testament that a single vision, pursued with dedication and courage, can ripple across generations, influencing everything from transportation to global connectivity. Even as the echoes of war faded, the B-29's story continued to soar. It reminded the world that boundaries exist to be tested, and that failure is merely a stepping stone toward mastery. Its legacy is visible in every pressurized cabin that carries a family across continents, in every multi-engine aircraft that takes off and lands safely against odds, and in every engineer or innovator who dares to tackle what others dismiss as impossible. The men and women of the B-29 project prove something timeless: that determination, creativity, and collaboration are forces more powerful than fear, doubt, or limitation. In their triumph, they left behind more than a plane. They left a blueprint for human achievement, a legacy that reminds us that with courage, ingenuity, and perseverance, no challenge is insurmountable. From 20 feet above the Wichita airfield, where the first B-29 prototype trembled under its own weight, to 30,000 feet over the vast expanse of the Pacific, the story of this remarkable aircraft is more than a tale of engineering. It is a testament to human courage, creativity, and determination. Each bolt tightened, each rivet hammered into place, each engine fired for the first time was an act of faith, a quiet declaration that limits exist only until someone decides to challenge them. Mechanics and engineers worked side by side, hands blackened with grease, eyes fixed on the impossible, transforming a fragile blueprint into a flying leviathan. The roar of its engines was not merely a sound of power. It was the sound of human ingenuity asserting itself against doubt, fear, and the relentless pressure of time. It was proof that audacity, when combined with skill and perseverance, can turn even the wildest dreams into reality. The B-29's trials were as dramatic as its triumphs. Crews faced engines that could erupt into flames without warning, hydraulics that might fail mid-flight, and structural quirks that required constant vigilance. Yet every near catastrophe became a lesson in resilience. One flight engineer famously recalled a moment when an engine ignited at 30,000 feet. "I prayed every deity I knew, then fixed it with duct tape and a wrench. Somehow, she flew again." That single sentence captures the essence of the entire project. The courage to confront the unknown, the ingenuity to invent solutions under pressure, and the perseverance to push forward when the outcome seemed uncertain. Each success was not only a technical achievement, but also a human one, A story of ordinary men and women refusing to accept the notion that something was impossible simply because it had never been done before. The impact of the B-29 extended far beyond the battlefield. Pressurized cabins, which allowed crews to survive at high altitudes, became a standard feature in commercial aviation, shaping the experience of air travel for generations. Multi-engine reliability, once a technical gamble, became a benchmark for safety and design in both military and civilian aircraft. Remote, operated systems, originally developed to keep gunners safe while enhancing accuracy, paved the way for advances in automation and avionics that continue to influence aerospace engineering today. Every innovation born from the B-29 was a ripple across time and industry, and demonstrating that the consequences of daring to solve impossible problems often reach far beyond the original challenge. Equally important, the B-29 teaches us about human collaboration and determination. Thousands of engineers, pilots, and mechanics worked in synchrony, each contribution essential, each success dependent on the skill and courage of the others. They navigated uncertainty, fatigue, and setbacks not in isolation, but as a community bound by a shared goal. Their work reminds us that great achievements are rarely the result of a single brilliant idea. They are the culmination of countless small acts of brilliance, ingenuity, and resolve. The B-29 was a machine, yes, but it was also a mirror reflecting the extraordinary capabilities that emerge when ordinary people commit themselves fully to a common purpose. And so, when we look at a plane soaring gracefully across the sky, or when we face any ambitious goal in our own lives, we must remember the lesson of the B-29. Impossible is not a verdict. It is an invitation. Every challenge that seems insurmountable is a test of creativity, courage, and persistence. Every failure along the way is not the end but a guide, showing what adjustments are needed to reach the summit. The sky, once a boundary, becomes a canvas, a space where human ingenuity writes its most remarkable stories. From the first hesitant steps on the Wichita tarmac to the thunderous engines over the Pacific, the B-29 tells us that audacity, when paired with skill and determination, can redefine the limits of what is possible. In every bolt tightened, in every engine fired, and in every flight that carried it higher and farther, the B-29 left a message for the world: the impossible is only impossible until someone dares to build it. Thank you.